Welcome to the Soldier Fund podcast, the platform for untold stories from the National Guard Special Forces community. Join us as we delve into the lives of these elite warriors and the journey of our nonprofit, dedicated to supporting their courageous mission to free the oppressed worldwide. I'm your host, Ben Derrick. Let's dive in. Jordan, another day, another dollar.
Seems like it.
That's what I hear, but for me, it's more like 50 cents.
Yeah, I don't know where the dollars are.
Maybe we should start a podcast. Where are the dollars?
A lot of people might listen to that and relate.
Yeah. Listen, it's been interesting down at the unit. Like the start of the year, it's like everything's quiet, and then boom, everything has to happen inside of 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because of all the things we ignored while we were doing other things with our families.
That's right. Well, that, in an odd way, that represents the tension, doesn't it? Like if I'm paying attention to this, it's very hard to pay attention to that, which we should probably do an episode on that as well. Taking time over the holidays, spending time with family. The Army is still going to Army. Absolutely.
Yeah, there were some guys, unfortunately, that were armying through the holidays. So that happens quite a bit in our career.
Yeah. How do you decide who does that?
I don't think you get to decide. That's something you're told.
That's right. That's how that works. Well, this episode today is going to be an interesting one. I've actually been working on this guy to get in the studio for, by my count, 3 months. And we kept talking about the idea, and we're finally here today. So we're very thankful for you to join us.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me in here, Ben. It's... nobody thinks that they're a super interesting guy, and so I always tell you I don't have much to talk about.
That's
it. I guess if you let me talk about me, I can probably do that for a while.
Yeah, nearly to a Green Beret, when I sit down and have this conversation, that's the first thing they say to me, like, I don't really think I'm interesting enough to be listened to. And then every episode, I'm proving you wrong. So I think this is going to be one of those. But just for our listeners, just for a little bit of credibility's sake, to talk about just your rank and times downrange, so we can get an idea of kind of where you are in career.
Okay. I'm a sergeant first class, and I've deployed 3 times. Only once with SF. The other 2 were with conventional units. And then
which is part of the story we're going to get into today.
Yeah. And then several other JSETs and other little trips here and there, but I'm sure we'll talk all about it.
Yeah, this is kind of the nooks and crannies of the National Guard SF life. It's like, well, deployments are one thing, but we're also gone a lot for other things to be ready for those deployments. I think in the civilian population, that's dramatically misunderstood, but it's the reason I'm talking about it now. It's the reason why when I ask times downrange, there's always a lot of math going on that the listeners can't see, because head off of pillow is not just dependent upon deployments. And that's a little bit different on the conventional side from what I'm hearing. But for you, really, we brought you into the studio today to discuss that, because there are a lot of our listeners that are in this camp that are on the conventional side that are thinking about maybe going SF. And you spent some time there thinking through that, which really intrigued me. So I'd love just if we could start talking about what attracted you to the military in the first place, because I think that also would give us some clues what made you want to make that jump to SF later on.
Yeah, so I grew up in a military household. I saw it my entire life. My dad was a career military guy. And so I think in the back of my head, I always kind of knew that it was going to be something that I would do. Didn't really pull the trigger. I was an indecisive, 18-year-old whenever I finally made the decision.
Okay.
And I've just kind of stuck with it. It seemed like the thing to, it's why get out, I'll just keep kind of plugging along.
I love how you're talking about I was indecisive all the way to 18. Like, I have a 17-year-old in my house. Like, I can't imagine him making the decision, like, you know what, I'm going to do this. That's pretty early, actually, to make the decision. But because of the type of family you grew up in, it felt maybe a little bit delayed.
Well, I had grown up around it, and I had seen it my entire life, so I was probably better informed than most. So whenever it came time to talk to a recruiter, my dad was able to introduce me and sit there with me and make sure that I wasn't getting any bad information. Not that a recruiter would ever do that. But
are they notorious for that?
Absolutely.
There's rumors.
Yeah.
Look, the guys that we know, the recruiters we know, special people, right?
Yeah, they're different.
They're different. Yeah.
Awesome awesome guys.
Yeah, awesome guys. So you make the decision to go in. So talk to me about how that happens. You're just like, hey, I'm just going big Army, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I've been career National Guard, so that's one of the things that's a little bit different about me is I joined the Mississippi National Guard when I was 18, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of guys that I work with that are in the unit, former Marine, former regular Army, former Rangerback guy, former different group guy, and so I'm a little bit of an outlier when it comes to that because there's not a ton of guys who were born and raised here, came up in the regular National Guard, and decided to make the switch. Mm-hmm. So I just decided that I wanted to still go to college, still pursue a civilian career. And but I also wanted to serve, and National Guard was a great option for that.
Yeah, so you were able to kind of ride both sides there,
Oh yeah, and I did that for a long time.
What was that like?
It was difficult until I figured out how to kind of change the mindsets, right? Because I can't, if I'm sergeant on this weekend, but then I go back to my regular job where I'm not in charge of anything, or vice versa, it can get complicated. I mean, I knew a guy who was he was a manager on an oil rig, and he was a specialist in one of my previous units. Mm-hmm. Our first sergeant worked for him on that oil rig. So things get complicated in the National Guard.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a shift you've talked about, actually, Jordan, coming back from being on deployment, just being in one mentality, and then you get back home and it's like, whoa, this is everybody here isn't operating with the same set of assumptions I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Man. It can even be down to like walking with a purpose. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you're watching somebody lollygag and you're like, why are you not moving? All the way up to you outrank them in the military, but they outrank you in your civilian world, whatever that job looks like.
Yeah. So you're skirting this for quite a while, right? How many years?
Oh yeah. So I was in the regular National Guard for around a decade before I finally made the switch or made the decision to really commit to the switch to chasing after special forces, because it's easy to get complacent, and it's easy, it's one of those things that was in the back of my head for years and years, and I said maybe one day I'll go do this, and it was almost a happy coincidence that things kind of fell into place, which I generally believe that happens a lot more than we think. If you are disciplined and you work hard, and a lot of times things will just happen the way they should. And that's kind of the way it happened for me.
How old were you when this happened, this shift over to SF or the chase?
So I really got pretty committed to it around not long after my wife and I had our first kid.
Well, that's a great time to start something new.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good planning.
Start a family, leave.
Then become SF.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't recommend doing it that way. If you're going to do it, by all means, do it when you're 22 and single. But I was very lucky that I've still got a great wife. Now, number one, I'm lucky she still hangs in there and puts up with all the stuff that we do. But she's been 100% committed with me the entire way through this, and so shout out to her. There's no way I could do any of this without her support, and I've had it from day one.
Yeah, that's unique, right?
And I know we're jesting with him now, but honestly, there takes that time and level of maturity to happen.
Yeah,
to be successful in this anyway. So even though we're messing around that the timing wasn't perfect, it probably actually was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot of maturation and growth during that time whenever I was becoming a father, and you start kind of really feeling your way into like real manhood as opposed to like I'm 18 and now I'm a man, and I think that played a big part in it, and also it forced me to be a little more disciplined and purposeful about my time and how I use that. Because when you have a newborn child, it's you don't have a ton of free time.
That's right.
So, it started, pursuing that, really focusing on getting back into shape, because at the time I had really kind of let myself go a little bit.
So you're talking about at the end of this decade period of being what you call regular guard, right? Just that 10 year, you're getting towards the end of that 10 years, and you're kind of you're not describing it as a crisis, but you were just unsettled. Like there's something left undone here. But even as you're having those thoughts, your physical condition isn't ready to make that step you're thinking about. That really intrigues me.
Yeah, so absolutely. I honestly, I probably would, everybody thinks that we're like super soldiers or whatever. I probably would have struggled to run 2 miles without having to stop to walk at that point. And so
that's not real. Really?
Yeah, no doubt.
I say that because I drive past you on my way to work. You're running.
Yeah.
So like.
Oh man, I'm a terrible runner. That's why I do it all the time.
You got to train for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Come to think of it, I slowed down once, like you were going to jump in, right?
Look, man, don't tempt me.
That's right.
So I kind of shifted my mindset at that point, and the way that I viewed it, the way I started viewing it, and the way that I still view it today is if I'm bad at something, then I need to do more of it. And so I went to the gym, just like the regular, 24/7 gym, and just started to get on a treadmill. And I decided I was going to run until I didn't hate running anymore. And
this was all internally motivated.
Yeah. I don't think I even told my wife at the time that I was considering this.
I was going to say, did you have the goal at that point to become a Green Beret? Is that what kind of pushed it, or was it?
I think I know that when I was 18, I wanted to be a Green Beret.
Okay.
There's no way I could have done it. I was not disciplined enough. I wasn't in the right mindset. I think that it took the years of gaining some maturity and gaining some leadership skills and all these kind of things, and I kind of reached that point. But at that point, I don't know if I'd even really admitted to myself that that's what I was working towards. But I think it was in the back of my head that I needed to do it, or I never would.
Yeah. Absolutely.
After 10 years, I was getting close to my, reaching 30. That's when everybody tells you it starts going downhill, and so, yeah.
Well, ironically, this is kind of that magic age that Jordan and I talk about all the time, that, not that you can predict success, but you put a 22-year-old up against a 28 or 30-year-old, when you're tested, it's better to know who you are, and that's hard to know at 21. Some people do. There are guys out there that do. But on the whole, what I find very interesting is you had this dream in the back of your mind, and you didn't chase it, but you positioned yourself kind of in the atmosphere. I'm going to be close enough to where if I want to reach for this, that I can. And then your physical condition, actually, if you had talked to yourself long enough about it, could have talked you out of it. But you found something to start doing something on your own, to be the self-starter. And it just, I'm telling you, man, it feels like to me the startings of the Green Beret mentality are there when you're getting on that treadmill at a civilian gym, and saying, I'm going to do this until I just don't hate it anymore. That probably summarizes a lot of the Green Beret's career. I'm just going to do this until I don't hate it anymore. So you get on this treadmill, you get yourself in shape, and, I'm really intrigued or interested about your experience in that transition, going to the first SFRE, then jumping into selection. And, man, that had to have been a really intense time in your life.
Yeah. Before that first SFRE, I actually was not planning on even going to it. It was like a Thursday, I think, and a friend of mine who had passed a recent SFRE, who actually is not in the unit now, he hit me up and said, "Hey man, there's the SFRE." It was something like it was a Thursday and it started on a Monday, or it was a Monday and it started on a Thursday. And I had been working out a lot. I'd been rucking, I'd been running, I'd been doing all this stuff, and not really quite sure why. And I was like, you know what, whatever. I'll be there. And so I reached out to our guy who is a good friend of mine now, who runs our SFREs, and of course he was, okay, whatever, man, come if you want to,
Perfect.
I'm not going to beg you to be here.
Exactly. Exactly. And, and so I showed up, and, it went from there. But, that first SFRE, I've been super lucky and super blessed to have pretty much went, I went straight through SFRE, selection, Q course, didn't have to recycle anything. And a lot of that is pure luck. but that's kind of where it started. Was I passed SFRE by the skin of my teeth, and didn't think I was ready, and I probably should have been in better shape. But I passed all the standards, and from there just got better.
How'd you do with land nav? That's a question I've got.
So land nav, where we do land nav, is very, very difficult.
That's right.
So I would say that at the SFRE, the land nav is even more difficult. It's shorter distance, but more difficult than actual selection. So if you pass that one, you're probably set up pretty good for success.
Yeah.
But I'd done land nav. I'd been in for 10 years. I've done courses. I've done land nav. So it wasn't too bad, other than just, I'd never done land nav at night with no lights, and you're stumbling around through, through briars, bushes, terrain, all these things, and it gets a little frustrating. There's a few choice words that you utter every once in a while whenever you trip over like a fallen log and your rucksack drives your face into the ground. But yeah, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. So just to satisfy my curiosity, which is, I guess, what we're doing today. That's okay. When did it click for you? Like, yep, this is it. This is why I got on that treadmill. This is why I signed up at 18. This is the thing.
That's a really hard question to answer. I know. So, as you're going through, especially all the selection pipelines and all that stuff, at least I can't speak for everybody. I was questioning myself the entire way of, questioning yourself of, can I do this? Am I passing? Because you don't know what your times are. You are questioning, is this something I really want to do whenever it's 20 degrees outside and you're soaking wet because you just had to go through, Scuba Road during selection, and now you're soaking wet and think that you're on the verge of like hypothermia, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, why am I could be at home right now in bed with my wife. I could, we could be, sleep until 10 a.m. on Saturdays, like whatever. But I just kind of kept thinking back to all the people I would disappoint. Mm-hmm. And part of that, my son was a huge motivation at that time because he was young. He didn't even know what I was doing, but I was looking forward to him being proud of me one day.
Come on.
So, not to get too sappy with it, but that's, everybody thinks about their legacy, right?
Sure.
And you want to think about how you'll be remembered. And that's part of it, is I wanted to at least try. Yeah. Because if you don't try, then you're one of those guys that like, oh man, I could throw a football over that, clear over the mountains, back when I was in high school type dudes.
Yeah. And I know a few of those guys. I may be that guy.
Yeah, we've talked about all of this before, as far as like guys feeling called to do something, and then the real assessment isn't necessarily selection and assessment. It's the self-assessment, the internal assessment that happens during that, and even into the Q course. And then I think we've even discussed how what makes a guy successful is he has a deeper backstop, which it sounds like is family, legacy, all these deeper meaning things. Maybe for some guys it's even faith and I feel called to be here. I have these talents and gifts, and those things drive me to do my best and push through this. Because, and I'll agree with you. For me, I thought I was kind of alone with this until we started talking about it, and you make it through the Q course and everybody talks about it. But I probably quit 1,000 times in my head, like especially laying on the ground, cold and wet. I'd be like, man, this is terrible. And I had those same thoughts of my wife and kids in a warm bed, and it's just like, I can't let them down. I have this deeper drive. I'm just not going to verbalize it. And I got to find the little thing, something that I can grab onto in the moment that pushes me to stay and be successful through this.
Yeah. The more time I've spent around you guys, I think that is a huge distinguishing marker, because, you can make excuses. I could even say, I don't want to disappoint them, but then the next thought I have is, they'll be fine.
There's plenty of those guys there too.
We'll have a talk, and I'll tell them how miserable I was, and they'll be glad I'm home.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's a larger purpose, a larger sense of meaning, I think, and I don't think it's sappy at all.
No.
I'm sorry to shoot square with you. I think a lot of it comes down to your motivation being legacy, and I think this is a big question question for the GB community, even now with the global theater, what's going around the world. Like, what is your motivation for being here? And that's going to be questioned. And then, Jordan, the conversations you and I have on planes going all over the U.S., what do you do when that motivation is still there, but you're not pointing it at your career? How do you go back and reach and grab that again in a different modality, which is a whole separate episode?
Oh, absolutely, and that's tough.
Yeah, very tough. But you dipping down into that conversation about this was really my motivation, and it being more of a slow cook there of okay, every iteration that I've got in this training, that's going to be the thing that I'm hanging on to. The thing that I'm hearing from you that's so interesting as well is that it wasn't even really about you. You know, I didn't hear you say over the past couple of minutes, I really wanted this. Yeah. So I stayed and got it done. Yeah. You know.
I mean, you know, there's everybody, and, you know, a lot of what Jordan said rings true about, you know, about family and things like that. But also about you know, you quit 1,000 times. I mean, you know, it's so easy to say that out loud now because you're comfortable in your skin, but I guarantee you there's a lot of guys out there who go, no, I never thought about quitting.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, no, not me. And I'm like, well, that's cool, man. I did. You know,
I did not want to be cold and wet. I ain't gonna lie about it.
It was all the way until in between SFA and selection, I probably kind of realized this is what I really want to do. And I knew I always wanted to do it, but it was like when I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to pursue this hardcore. But, you know, the whole time it's a selection process. Like, you doesn't matter how bad you want it. It matters how you perform, right? And so there is a how bad you want it, but there's also, did you do the work beforehand? And there's lots of people that are in that I want it really bad but didn't do the work camp, right? And there's some that do the work, and, you know, like I said earlier about being lucky, you know, I've seen guys that were much more physically fit than me, you know, absolute studs, that snap an ankle during selection and that's it, right? You know, you have a 200-pound log on your back and you step in a hole. That wasn't your fault. Yeah. But I've just been very lucky that none of that happened to me. That was too debilitating, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, as I moved forward into the Q course and all those things, you're still being evaluated, you're still being assessed. They tell you that all the time, and then you get to a team and you're still being evaluated and assessed, right? And so it was probably a year or two into being on a team before I actually believed that I belonged there and that I was contributing and a valuable member of the team, right? Because you still have a lot to learn once you get to a team. And there's still a lot of like, all right, like, yeah, we got the new guy. All right, he's in good shape. Okay, cool. What else is he going to contribute? Does he fit in with the team? All those things. And so eventually you start getting more comfortable in your skin and everybody else gets more comfortable with you. And then, you know, there's a lot of imposter syndrome floating around SF. A lot of guys, especially early on, when you're like, you know, I got this hat, and you know, they tell me that I passed everything, but like I still don't feel like a Green Beret. And I think a year or two into being on a team, you start to really kind of feel that.
Do you think this is a question for both of you? A response to just being constantly evaluated without knowing results of that evaluation. I mean, that's got to do something to a person, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think you get used to it. Like, it's just a way of life because you're self-assessing and someone else is assessing you. And it's just like we were just talking about. When you get to a team, the team is looking at you and trying to see, does this guy fit? Is he going to do everything that personality of the team does? And it does. I would say a 1 to 2 year time frame there, where you're just, do I belong here? Do I like these guys? Do they even like me? And then all of a sudden, it's like learning a new language. You know, you finally, one day it just clicks and you can speak Spanish. It's like that. It's like one day you show up and the gears are moving and everything's oiled and it just feels right.
Yeah. That's
At
got to
least
be a
in
good
my
day.
experience. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you go and do stuff with the way we are, and I imagine it's like this at most groups is, you may occasionally go and do stuff with other teams every once in a while. And they're cool. They're still dudes on still Green Berets. They're dudes on a team, but they're not your guys. And then whenever you go back to your team, I experienced this last year, right? You go back to your team, and I'm like, man, this just feels right.
Yeah, that's it. It feels like family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the closest thing you can get to it is it feels like family.
Yeah, this is the overlap because almost to a man who's been on this podcast, there are two groups of people that Green Beret doesn't want to let down: his family and his team. So it makes sense that they would kind of feel very similar, which gets us back to the original point of this conversation, kind of hanging between two very important entities in your life. And we bring this up nearly every episode, predominantly because I feel it's so important, because I think it gets to the root of what civilians like me don't understand about National Guard Special Forces. That, because I grew up watching my uncle once a month, leave for the weekend. He was back pretty early Sunday afternoon, and, he never looked any worse for the wear. I'm very proud of their service, but peacetime, there's a lot of stuff involved there, but most civilians have in their mind that's what the Guard is, right? And you actually lived that life for nearly a decade.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I did, besides deployments, which, those, were what they were. Besides deployments, it was 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, that whole deal. And then whenever I transitioned over to SF, I started doing what's called guard bumming. I don't know if y'all have talked about that.
Have we talked about that?
Not yet, but since you bring it up,
you got to define it.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
Maybe that should be our title.
Yeah. So the SF dictionary bringing together as many different schools and orders and whatever you can to try to get a consistent paycheck. So that you can be an SF guy full time and avoid being a real boy. So,
all right, let me slow down just a second, because I have conversations with donors on a weekly basis where I'm trying to explain this. So just to be able to send them a link to listen to this part of the episode would be great. So you've done all of this shit to become a Green Beret over the course of a number of years. Then you land on a team and you're paying rent on that team for 12 months, 18 months before you feel settled in. All that stuff is going on, and in the back of your mind, you're like, how do I do this and actually get paid?
Yeah.
That's a real question.
Yeah, for sure. So the short answer is it's actually not too difficult to stay busy in SF. It's hard to believe, right? You can, and especially if you work hard. If you are a good worker, you show up. You essentially be the guy that shows up. People will want you to come work for them. And so, the way we do it is we string together schools. We string together once you go to schools, a lot of times you can go be an instructor at various places. So I was pretty lucky that I got in with some of the guys over at Group and helped instruct some of our really awesome courses. And you just kind of make it work. Now the downside of that is, for mama and for the kids, it doesn't matter if you're in, Iraq or if you're in Alabama, you're either home or you're away, right? And that's really all it comes down to. So it kind of got to a point after probably 2 to 3 years of doing that I said, I need to be home a little more now that I've gained a lot of skills. I've met a lot of people and really kind of established myself a little bit more than what I was. And tried to build a good reputation for myself. And then it's time to maybe all right, time to focus on family a little bit more and figure out what I can do where I can be home every night and I can be at Little League games and I can be at, dance recitals or whatever.
Yeah.
So
that's
kind of where I was.
You made that shift. You were able to work that out in your career. But key question here, that was your responsibility to figure out. No one's going to get that glide path figured out for you.
Oh, for sure. And there's some heartache involved in it. And like I said before, super supportive family. So my wife was there for it. But whenever she finally says, hey, we need you home a little more, you should listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't be that guy who's, thrice divorced and, just chasing the next thing, because the next thing is never as good as they say it's going to be. And there's always going to be something. There's always going to be somebody asking, especially if you're a pretty good dude and you work hard. There's always going to be people looking for you to come and help them out. And that's great. You want to be that guy, right? But at the same time, you want to push the brakes a little bit whenever you need to, and take care of yourself and your family, because they're the ones that are going to be there whenever you hit that 20-year mark or decide to ETS or whatever you decide to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're talking about it so fluidly, but that's got to be a difficult thing, right? I mean, your mission is to free the oppressed. We talk about this a lot. So when is that mission ever complete, right? You seem to be, in the way that you're answering these questions today, though, you're one of those guys that can strike a balance pretty well. Is that a skill you've always had, or is that something you figured out through, failing forward? How did you come about that?
It's definitely something you learn over time, and it's constantly changing, right? Like there are certain times where you can put a little more into your SF career. There's a little more time. There's sometimes you have to put a little more into the family, and you have to. It ebbs and flows, and you kind of have to feel that out, and be empathetic towards family members. Understand whenever they say that they need help with something. But that's really all it is you fill it out, and you know what's right. But it's not something that you're born with, and it's not something that you're going to get right every time either. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have to give yourself a little bit of grace. Like, I can't tell you how many birthdays I've missed, how many holidays, how many whatever. But the key for me that I found is, whenever I'm home, I'm home. I am in the floor playing with Legos, or we're riding the dirt bike out in the yard, or where I'm cooking supper, or I'm doing whatever. And you have to maximize that amount of time at home, because unfortunately you can't save that up and spend some later, right? Like it's you have a certain amount of time that you can actually do that, and then whenever you have to go, it's time to go to work and do your job. You can focus solely on that.
Yeah, you've made deposits in one account so you can make some withdrawals when necessary. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It feels like to me, based on your backstory, the way you're describing it, though, you may have had a head start in that, being a part of a military family, kind of watching that exchange, perhaps, as you were growing up, because I, inside of HPW, have a lot of conversations about this very dynamic that you're describing right now. How exactly do I do that? Because, the truth is, it's not like Signal's going to say, oh, wait, you're with your family. We're going to quiet Signal down just a little bit right now. Yeah. And it just doesn't work that way.
Well, it does if you mute the chat, which sometimes happens. But yeah, stuff comes up all the time. Whether it be with my full-time job or with my team, all throughout the month, we have meetings all the time. There's constantly work that needs to be done for this training event or this upcoming deployment or whatever. The list goes on forever. But you have to figure out how to separate that out as much as you can, and and like I said, just spend as much time with your family as you can, and be there and present. Yeah, whenever you are there.
Yeah, if you don't, one of them is going to fail. Yeah, and it goes. We said earlier, your family and then your team as a family, that causes an internal struggle for our dudes. Yeah, and then it's they end up. Right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of guys get sucked into the team side of that, and then the family goes to the wayside. Yeah. So, that's an unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. Right. I wish there were, 10, 15 years ago when I was starting up, I wish there was this kind of conversations happening that was like, hey, man, I wish I had a mentor, someone that had already lived it, saying, hey, make sure you're making those deposits into your family, because I was one of the guys that learned through failure of pouring too much into the team and into the military and pushing as hard as I could, because even though I loved my family and was telling them I loved them, maybe I wasn't spending as much time. And a lot of guys can relate to that. We've talked to several of those guys outside of this office.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a balance. I think we have a lot of sympathy for, because neither side is actually going to win, right?
Right.
You're tied between two horses, as we say a lot, and someone's slapped them both, right? So it can be a difficult balance to strike. I appreciate your candor and your honesty there. If you have a little bit more time, I'd like to just hit you with two more questions before we wrap today.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first would be, with where you are in your career now, what fires you up about where you are now? I know we can't go into a lot of detail here, but one, being able to go do training with guys who are super awesome, and that's the big thing for us, is like you're constantly trying to live up to all the people around you, and like I said before, like I haven't always been this great. I played sports in high school and stuff, but I was never a D1 athlete like some of these guys. We've got guys from all different backgrounds, and so it's like you're trying to keep up with those guys, and there's other guys who have master's degrees and PhDs and stuff. And there's, man, I'm a redneck from South Mississippi, so I'm just like constantly trying to tread water and keep up with those guys, but it pushes you to be better. And so that's part of what fires me up and what motivates me, and why I do things until they don't suck anymore. Because I don't want to be the guy that drags everybody else down and slows down the team. And these guys are great motivation for me, and super impressive people that we work with all the time. I love all the same things that everybody else does. We shooting guns and going to foreign countries and training dudes and getting to do all the awesome things that we do. I mean, I know I've kind of been talking a lot about family and stuff, but like the stuff we get to do, I'm super lucky that I get to do that for a living. I told a friend of mine, I was like, he was asking about meeting up, and our family's doing vacations. He's a civilian friend of mine, and I was like, man, I can't that month. I've got a thing in Europe. And he was like, you sound so douchey right now. I was like, yeah, man, but it's, we get to go all over the world and do awesome things. And every once in a while I take a step back, or I try to, and look at it and be like, man, like I get to do this, and this is what I get paid for. It's a little bit surreal. Yeah. And, but especially after all the time I spent in the regular guard and all that stuff, and I've still got friends that, over there. And, I'm like, man, like the absolute worst day here is better than the best day I spent in the other half of the Mississippi National Guard. And there's no shade on them, but man, it's just like we get so much more support. We get so much more, we have lots of training opportunities. I'm super happy that I made that decision, and all that work and pain and time away from family for me has really paid dividends. Yeah, that's great to hear. I love a success story, man. We're not going to be mad about that at all. Yeah. So congratulations on that score. Well, from being around us from time to time that we've got this nonprofit, which is a huge driver behind this podcast and the things that it's trying to do. I would love for a man as articulate as you to be able to describe, why you believe that Green Berets need help from the civilian population, and what would motivate that? Because there's a certain segment out there that's like, wait a minute, like it feels like the United States government should be taking care of these guys. And they are, right? We're not trying to talk bad about the government or the Army. We have to say that also nearly every episode. Yeah. Certainly not. But there's a gap there, it feels, that our nonprofit is trying to move in and take care of guys in a different way. And I'm trying to ask this question delicately without trying to make Green Beret sound like a victim, because that would be very disrespectful. But it feels the time is right for the civilian population to move in and lend a helping hand to the efforts that the Green Berets are a part of around the world. Do you feel that need as well? The only thing that I'll say to contradict that is that nobody's ever going to say that we're the type of person that, like, we're not going to say, I need you to do this for me. Right. Because we, at least the way I feel, it's I should be able to handle things myself. And that's not a great mentality all the time, right? Like Jordan said earlier, it was,
you started in SF before I did, and there was we were going through the GWAT and all these things, and there was a lot of like push, and that's great. You guys did awesome things, and but I feel super lucky that I am reaping the benefits of the lessons that you guys learned, and as far as like the mental health and the taking care of family. I mean, this organization that I'm in now is, I've never been in a place like this that cared as much about family, and constantly, hey, do you need what's going on with you? What do you need? And you guys at the Soldier Fund, I've seen since you guys have started really working with us, and I've been seeing it firsthand. It's been pretty awesome. A lot of the stuff that you guys have been doing, from the study that we did, the brain study with the with the Whoop bands and all those things, like that's been awesome.
Yeah.
All of the things, the programs and opportunities that you guys have been providing to us have been awesome, and we want to think that we can take care of everything ourselves, but it is really nice to get that helping hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, I love this organization, and in the military, I've been doing it for close to 20 years now.
Man.
It's what you guys are doing is, I've never seen anything like it anywhere else. And to be honest, it wouldn't, if it weren't for those civilians that were willing to donate and basically, frankly, like give a crap.
Yes.
Then like none of this would happen, and we wouldn't have we wouldn't have any of these opportunities that you guys are providing for us right now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I usually say we're looking for a larger group of people to give a damn. That's really it. And it isn't that any Green Beret needs rescue, but equipping, we can get behind that. And I think a lot of Green Berets can get behind that. Like the brain tap study, help me sleep a little better, right? That's going to help me be bigger, stronger, faster for longer. That's the idea. And if we can point some resources towards that, I don't know a Green Beret that would turn that down.
No, I mean, that's what it's all about for us at this point. Once you get in, it starts taking a toll on your body, especially in SF, because you're jumping out of airplanes, you're constantly shooting, you're around toxins, whenever you deploy, and all these kind of things, and lead in the shoot house and all these things. And, we've seen a big push, I would say I've seen it in the last 5 years or so, to really start paying attention to those things and paying attention to like mental health and, the welfare of families and all these kind of things. And it's been awesome. I mean, there's probably never been a time in American history that soldiers have been taken so well taken care of.
Yeah.
And I mean, for us, it's directly, a big part of that's directly thanks to you guys.
Yeah. Well, we're honored to do it. And before we wrap up this episode, thanks for making the time to be here. But more importantly than that, I want to say every chance I can with the man behind the mic, thank you for the decisions you made and the walk that you made into that gym to get on that treadmill to become a different kind of man our society has benefited from. And I wish we had more of you. So since you're behind Mike, you can't just get up and leave the office like you guys normally do. Thank you for what you've done, for the kind of American you are, the kind of man you are. The sacrifices that you and your family have made have not gone unnoticed, and we are making our voice louder to say we're deeply grateful for the kind of man you are. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate that, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to the Soldier Fund podcast. If you're inspired by the stories of these elite citizen warriors and want to support their mission, visit us at thesoldierfund.org. Your contributions help us to continue to back the Special Forces soldiers of the National Guard as they fight around the world. Until next time, stay committed to stand with those who serve.